Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
Welcome to the 905er. Before we begin today's episode, we want to say that we are enjoying having you as our listener. We hope that you have found the work we've been doing to be entertaining as well as informative, and that this is exactly what you want out of a podcast. We enjoy this work, and today's episode is a prime example of just what this format can offer to inform and educate the public on nuances and complex issues. This is exactly what Roland and I were aiming for when we created the 905er. However, there's so much more that we intend to accomplish. But to do that, we need your help. If you have been a long-time listener, please consider signing up as a 905er yourself through our Patreon. Patreon has updated its services so that it now uses Canadian currency and can offer yearly subscriptions. Take the time to help support this podcast so that it can grow into the voice the 905 region desperately needs. Links to do so are in the show notes. And now on with the show. As 2021 started, our news was blanketed by stories of politicians and public officials who were caught traveling for personal reasons outside the country. All of these were done over the holiday season in opposition to the current calls for all of us to stay home for Christmas and New Year's. Understandably, the public was outraged. How dare these hypocrites try to dictate the rules to us? They can't even follow their own rules. It seemed that there was one set for us and another for the powers that be. Politicians were forced to resign en masse, and public officials were being called in for questioning in order to keep their jobs. Here in the 905, we were not immune from this pattern. It was discovered that Chief Steve Tanner of the Halton Police had traveled to Florida over the holidays to inspect personal property to prepare it for personal sale. As he rushed back to the country, it was further discovered that the police board chair, Mayor Rob Burton, authorized that vacation. Mayor Burton tendered his resignation as chair shortly after that discovery. On January 21st, after a 20-hour closed-door session, the Halton Police Services Board declared that Chief Tanner would keep his position with, quote, full and unequivocal confidence, end quote. This caused much anger and confusion from the police union president as well as from the public at large. In light of all that, we wanted to hear from the now police board chair, Councillor Jeff Knoll, to hear the reasoning behind that decision. Now, I will admit that this interview helped to reshape my thoughts surrounding the issue, and it did in fact change my mind on some of the preconceived notions I had going into the discussion with Councillor Knoll. I must say it is very much worth the listen to in order to completely understand the facts surrounding this issue. Now finally, just as an issue of editorial transparency, I'd like to let our listeners know that I was the one who conducted the interview entirely. I drafted the questions, and I was the one who asked them. Roland declined to participate due to a potential conflict of interest, and he was only present just to help record the podcast and to provide producer credits. Thank you very much, and enjoy the episode. Okay, well, I'd like to thank Councillor Jeff Knoll for coming on to the podcast today. Thank you, Councillor, for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure.
Well, let's get right into it. The reason why we had you on is, of course, to talk about the decision by the Halton Regional Police Services to keep Chief Tanner on as the Halton Regional Police Chief. This decision came about during a time when public officials were caught traveling in the face of health recommendations from the federal, as well as regional governments, telling Canadians not to leave the country. We have seen that Rod Phillips resigned as finance minister here in Ontario. Liberal MP Kamal Khera resigned as her parliamentary secretary position. And in Saskatchewan, Cabinet Minister Joe Hargrave resigned for basically doing the exact same thing that Chief Tanner did, which was to go to the U.S. to inspect personal property. And I'm wondering if maybe you want to comment on just, do you see any of the parallels between what happened with them and what happened with Chief Tanner, and maybe your perspective on the situation?
Well, I think that it's important, first of all, to reemphasize what the federal government's position is on this. There is no specific ban on travel, which I think is important to understand, because that if there was a ban on travel, then in fact he would have done something that would have been in violation of a law or a policy. The specific guidance the federal government is giving clearly states the government advises there are no air travel restrictions to the United States other than the government warning against non-essential travel. And then when you define non-essential, the government specifically says it is up to you to decide what non-essential travel means based on family or business requirements, knowledge or familiarity with the country, territory, region, or other factors. So, I mean, fundamentally, Chief Tanner violated no rule, no law, did not violate his contract, any policy with the police department, even the federal government's own guidelines regarding United States travel. So, I mean, putting it in context is important. Yes, there have been a number of high-profile, individuals that have traveled. Some have simply had the apology accepted. Others have had to take other steps. But even when you look at people like Rod Phillips or the various members of the Liberal caucus, et cetera, that have traveled, these folks have resigned cabinet or extra positions within their responsibilities. They have not left Parliament or the Legislative Assembly. They're still collecting the bulk of their income and still maintain their futures. They're paying a penance for their mistake, and a mistake that's being made by individuals that are involved in the public process, the public policy making process. If you look at somebody like Rod Phillips, I mean, he was at the cabinet table, and probably on a daily basis discussing this and being part of the decision-making team on this issue. The chief had a property that had been damaged by a hurricane, had been filling up with mold and required remediation, as well as they needed to sell the thing. They've been sitting on it for a year because of the pandemic. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to sit on a property that's damaged, that's having insurance issues, that I had intended to sell in order to build another property, which was under construction. I mean, it's a public relations blunder. It's not a legal blunder. And so the board, which we set out in our resolutions, we're disappointed he made the decision he made, because there probably, there may have been other alternatives. I mean, I can't imagine as simple as hiring a property management firm to come and mow your lawn in your absence when you're having to deal with, significant damage and insurance claims and all those sorts of things. But, I do recognize the fact that he is a public official. And that it was one of the main reasons that we took it as seriously as we did. We really needed to get to the bottom of this to understand why he traveled, what the decision matrix was, thoroughly investigate whether he did break any guideline or rule or anything at all that would have, potentially put him at risk of compromising his oath of office, his responsibility to the service, etc. And after deliberations and legal advice, there's nothing there. I mean, there's no violation of law. There's no violation of his contract. There's no violation of a Halton Regional Police Service policy. There's nothing in employment standards or labor code. There's nothing that would say that what he has done has in any way, been an illegal act. And so, we have to make a decision based on the best interests of the community. And the best interests of the community are, one, he's been a great chief. We have the lowest crime rate of any regional municipality of less than 100,000. The best crime statistics of all the police services in the Big 12. We have delivered programs and services to this community which are second to none across Ontario for mental health aspects. Our COAST program, our community safety and well-being plan. These are all initiatives that were led by a really great chief. Is it prudent to our community, notwithstanding those folks who were deeply upset by it, and I understand that. But is it prudent for our community to go into a search mode for a new chief, put the current chief through a long Police Services Act hearing, because you can't just fire any police officer. You have to go through a hearing and then ultimately deal with a fairly substantial payout for the sake of something, again, that is bad PR,
Right.
but not illegal. And so that's where the decision came from.
Okay. I see. I do see your point there, and I understand the. I mean, you have contractual obligations to Chief Tanner that you need to honor and recognize, and I understand that.
Right. Yeah.
Moving on, I wanted to ask you about your predecessor, Mayor Rob Burton. Now, he resigned as chair of police services over this matter. And
Yes.
Chief Tanner has remained with the full confidence of the service board. I'm wondering, could you, because this is a question that people are bringing up to us, is why was it appropriate for Mayor Burton to resign as chair of the Police Services Board, and yet Chief Tanner did not have to resign? I know you kind of touched on that, but people are wondering why it seems that Mayor Burton is the one bearing the fault here, not Chief Tanner, for Chief Tanner's decision.
Well, again, Chief Tanner made a decision. He's apologized. The board has essentially said what you did was a mistake. So we've gone as far as we can legally go, frankly. In terms of the chair of the board, like any other politician, we are held to a high standard of understanding the mood of the community, to understanding the nuances of public policy making. And, I think from that perspective, the mayor made a mistake, and he acknowledged the mistake. He should not have given permission. It should have brought it back to the board, to have us discuss this request. And, he is taking, he basically, acknowledged that, I won't call it necessarily misdeed, but certainly an error in judgment through his resignation. And again, I want to point out that very much like, Rod Phillips or any of the other members of the legislatures or parliament that have taken similar moves, he stepped aside from a position that is, extraneous to his main job, which is as mayor of Oakville. And in this particular case, there is no additional income as a result. So, I mean, it wasn't even that big a penalty for him, frankly, other than the prestige of not being a chair of the board anymore. But I mean, he ultimately was the one that gave the permission and set this entire series of events into action. He, as the representative of the employer being the Police Services Board, should have judged the potential backlash this could have created. He, again, is in the public facing business of being a political leader, being on the cutting edge, like all of us, of understanding the implications of the pandemic and the need to not just follow the laws, but also follow prudent measures, particularly those of us in leadership. And I think he again, in retrospect, he made a mistake. And I will make one more comment on this. This permission and the travel was all given at a time prior to all of this. I don't want to use the word hysteria because it makes it sound like it's negative from the people that are raising the alarms, but it came before anybody else being outed for traveling. Mm-hmm. So, it was before Rod Phillips, it was before any of the other ones that the permission was given and that he sought travel. I'm not sure that, in fairness, that anybody would have speculated at the public's, I guess, a frustration about this situation. I mean, Rod Phillips really I won't say he ruined it for everybody, but I think he set a really bad bar for judging these situations, because not only did he traveled on a vacation and whether explicitly or implicitly tried to cover it up with, social media photos and videos and, mm-hmm. and, showing up at a Zoom meeting in a sweater, by the ocean, in 90-degree weather. So I think it's a little different scenario.
It is a different. It's not an apples to apples comparison, and I don't want to make that assertion. I think a lot of people are upset at the fact that for weeks prior to the holiday season, we were being told by provincial, regional health officials and the federal government, stay at home, don't travel, cancel trips to go visit family and friends who might live in the U.S. or live out of province or wherever. And a lot of people did that under the assumption of, well, this is going to help bring down COVID numbers. And I can understand where I can understand where people get upset is that when you hear of public officials, not just politicians, but there was the health official out in Niagara who left their position to go on a vacation as well. Again, not quite an apples to apples comparison, but there was a sense running through the community of all these people that we were relying on to lead us through this pandemic had not followed the rules that we were all following.
Well, guidelines. I mean, they're not rules. Yeah.
So I can understand that there was a bit of a sense amongst the general population, and yeah, I mean, it was probably bad timing on the chief's part to get looped up in it, as it is. I do want to point out that you are now the chair of the Police Services Board, correct?
That's correct.
Yep. And you made the minutes of this meeting you made public in light of trying to keep this transparent, which I want to give credit to you for that. In the minutes, you said, as is customary, Chief Tanner advised his staff and deputies of his planned travel, and he remained in constant contact at all times while out of the country. I'm wondering if do you know anyone who else knew that Chief Tanner had left Canada during the holiday season, or was it just his staff and Mayor Burton who were aware of this of his trip to Florida?
I can't. I mean, the extent of my investigation pertains to the service itself, and my understanding is that, as is customary, his staff as well as the deputies and the key folks that he interacts with on a daily basis, were advised. Again, that's a customary circumstance. We have a very strong leadership team, and our deputies and our chief are in many ways interchangeable with one another. So, as is normally the case, when the deputies are away, the chief is away, there's not necessarily and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is one of the things we're going to review as to whether this is really truly a best practice. But there was no blanket statement put out saying, hey, I'm away, because he remained the chief while he was away. He was still in touch, and electronically was still able to execute his responsibilities while on his own vacation time, et cetera, which is typically the way that most chiefs operate. It's a job that you don't leave, even when you're away. You sort of have to stay on top of, because that's the nature of the job. It's a 24/7 job. But I just want to go back to can I go back to something you just stated, because I want to be very
sure.
You made some comments, and I just wanted to clarify something. Nothing that I'm saying excuses my disappointment that this occurred at all. I own Disney Vacation Club timeshare points in Florida, and I've had to basically write off thousands of dollars value because it's a thing that I've had to do. I would not dare take a vacation or travel, not just for the public perceptions reasons, but for the potential safety risks as well. So I do not excuse what happened here, and that's just like other board members, like we took this extremely seriously. This really, to us, said, what a bonehead mistake this was. There probably was other ways of dealing with that situation with his house, and I understand it's grave. So I just want to make that clear, because you sort of made it sound like
I apologize.
Maybe I made it sound like I was.
I wasn't trying to accuse you at all of inappropriate conduct. That if I did that, my apologies. It was not my intention.
I'm not suggesting you accuse me. I just want to be careful with that what you said, and I may have led to that impression as well. That I and other members of the board we're disappointed with the circumstances, but make no mistake about it, that these were guidelines, and yes, if it had been a law, or if it had been a specific order like we're dealing with now, I don't think that. I can guarantee you that this 39-year professional policing officer would have never considered violating it for a moment. And I believe that with all my heart, having known him for 9 years now. He is a very honorable individual that's done a great job, and I don't think he would have violated those rules. But again, they were guidelines, and even if you look at the current set of restrictions that we're dealing with under this lockdown today, the ones that the province has initiated that we're all contending with right now, one of the exceptions for leaving your home is to transact the purchase or sale of a home.
Right.
So I mean, there are precedents. There are guidelines. All the guidelines right from the get-go have been, if you have to repair your home or you have to sell your home or you have to buy a home, these are exemptions. But you're expected to use due caution. And the due caution in this case was, he traveled, he got tested on the way down, he got tested there, and he got tested again before he had to come back. And he was in a 14-day quarantine at his own cost because he had to use his own vacation time to do that. So again, none of that excuses it. But I mean, this is, again, I just want to emphasize, this is mostly a public relations blunder of epic proportions, but nobody's public health was ever put at risk. He violated no laws, etc. And I've said that before. So I just want to make that clear. Okay. That, we're really dealing with that perceptional leadership issue, which is so important in policing. And so, and that's why the board took this so seriously, within the framework of what we were able to do and what is most prudent for our community.
And the minutes that you released, we were going through them, and we noticed that at no point in the document was a resignation discussed or mentioned. And I do want to ask if at any point in the 20-hour meeting that you had, was a resignation asked for or was it offered by Chief Tanner?
So I can't, and this is going to sound like a deflection, so I want to be I apologize in advance. Under the municipal freedom of information and privacy protection legislation, we can't discuss, what any matter related to an HR matter outside of a board setting. It's against the law, and it applies to municipalities and police boards and all other agencies. And frankly, also, it also applies to, businesses as well. You can't disclose personal information of that nature. And so I can't really go into detail about specifics of what we talked about. What I can do to help you understand what those minutes do contain is that minutes of a municipal board or agency, or even frankly minutes that are drawn up in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, do not contain a running dialogue. They simply contain significant occurrences within a meeting. For example, somebody delegating motions passed, opening and closing of meetings. And so that's why there's not much in there. If you look at municipal council meetings, you won't find, Councillor Bob said this and Councillor Jones replied that, and so you don't see a running commentary. So that's why they're not in the minutes. We went to the exceptional route of wanting to provide as much information as we can. And the most important thing that comes out of us releasing those minutes is that 2-page motion was now public. And that motion didn't include just the operative pieces. It actually was a mind map of what led to that decision, which again is not typically seen in a set of minutes. You normally just have be it resolved that these things happen, and you don't really understand, well, why'd they make that decision? So that's as much as we can provide.
I understand. I understand. I get where you're coming from. I just have one final question to ask, Counselor.
Sure.
Going forward, lessons learned of this experience.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell our listeners, what policy changes are you and the board looking at to ensure that a confusion like this doesn't happen again? Just so that we as citizens of Halton can have confidence in our police and our police leadership throughout.
Well, first and foremost, this in no way is an operational issue. So you can have the utmost confidence, and this is why the board said this. We judge our staff, whether it be the chief or an officer, based on their deeds and actions. And the fact is that our chief has done an exemplary job in his years as our chief, and he's had a 39-year career in policing, which he started in Halton. I mean, other than this is like his one big issue, in 39 years, which you got to say is pretty exemplary. So the public can feel 100% secure that our police have their best interests at stake, and none of this, even this decision, again, that may have been made is that relates largely to bad optics, does not in any way impact policing. But what we are going to do as a board is, and it's in the resolution, we are going to look at refining policy around notification of vacation periods, who actually gets to approve vacations. There was a bit of a breakdown there because technically it was supposed to be the board that approves the vacation. So it looks like, and this has been kind of a common practice, it appears that at some point that board authority was delegated to the chairman. So again, with the concept of proper oversight, perhaps we need to go back and make sure that that is not just reinforced, but that maybe it's re-clarified that decisions over a certain period of time, or vacations over a certain period of time, maybe even vacations taken internationally, because they have an implication on being able to return and such, have to actually be approved by the board in advance. So we'll have issues around that. We're going to look at issues around who's notified, and should we actually be requiring the appointment of a deputy chief in the absence of the chief, and if so, under what circumstances would it be? Travel in Canada? Would it be travel internationally? Would it be travel, to the United States, et cetera? So we're going to look at basically all of the pieces that fall within this, and perhaps even a policy statement around, the chief has to, follow public health, advisories as a matter of leadership. I mean, we may find ways to incorporate that in there. I mean, this was, if you look at it, in terms of, what can you extract from this as a positive? Well, one of the positives is that we can go through and tighten up some of these cultural or corporate practices that really may need to be codified and reviewed under our new environment. We're all learning what it's like to live in this environment, but also just for proper accountability and management. Not just to the public, but to the members of the service that serve so bravely and wonderfully, our association members, our civilian members, et cetera. So I think that there's some checks and balances that we probably need to put in place that, again, may not have been there. I can say they largely weren't there for everybody's protection. I mean, this would not only give the public and the association and the leadership of the service some comfort. It would give the chief comfort, to understand what the clear expectations are, and the board clear expectations. Us setting clear expectations of what we want from the chief when it comes to these issues, and not simply operate in a business as usual kind of mode, because we all know that we are no longer living in a business as usual world. And in fact, that very expression probably needs to be stricken from our lips, because, we've embarked on a whole new chapter.
Well, we do have a state of emergency technically declared in the province. I mean, that's been perpetuated for almost a year now.
Yeah.
And of course, that's where technology intervened. And for some reason, our very reliable podcasts recording software that we've been using for the last 6 months lost a couple of minutes at the end of the interview. But actually, I can assure you, as producer for the week, that Joel and the councillor were wrapping up the interview at that point, and it was a matter of saying thank you very much to the councillor for being so generous with his time and coming on the podcast to answer questions.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.